Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. I hope you've all had a good time over Easter with your loved ones and you're all staying safe at home. Today we're taking a look as a loyal chapter of the Adeptus Astartes turns from the light of the Emperor. Before I go any further, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Ian for the virtual gift voucher. Thank you very much, my friend. I truly appreciate it. Thank you. The events we are discussing today are from the free short story Burden of Brotherhood by Duncan Wall. Now this is a free short story on the Warhammer community website as part of the next chapter of the Psychic Awakening campaign. As always, I really recommend you read the story for yourself first, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. If you're new to the Warhammer community website, I do recommend you check it out, as that's the best place to get the news straight from GW themselves. There's a link to the story in the description as always. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. Now this story kicks off with a chapter master named Corian standing over the body of a fellow space marine, who Corian has just killed himself, the claws of his lightning claw still crackling within his grasp. Which chapter Corian is master of is unsaid, left to our own interpretations. The chapter master kneels down, placing a hand on the fallen brother's shoulder pad, clearly having taken no joy in the act he has just committed. Rising back to his feet, Corian looks to his inner circle, a small group of captains and lieutenants present for the ceremony, the expressions on their faces as grim as his own. It's clear nobody has enjoyed what's taken place, that it's done out of necessity rather than anything else. And it's not the first time, nor will it be the last. As he stepped away from the motionless corpse, Corian struggled to maintain his composure. To die on the battlefield was one thing. That was expected of a space marine. But this, on one's knees in a darkened hold far from battle, it was not right. He stared at the man he had once called brother, a man he had killed with his own hand, and felt a dark malaise creep over him. Every time he found himself in this place, that sensation rooted itself further and further into his soul. And it became that much harder for him to come out the other side of it. Powerful emotions roiled deep within the chapter master, threatening to boil up to the surface at the mildest provocation. And he struggled to get them back under control. Kafal, one of the number of captains that were present, moved forward, seemingly about to speak. Yet upon making eye contact with Corian, the man held silent, retiring back to the edge of the circle. Standing in the centre of the group, their dead brother lying at his feet, Corian knew that he should say something. That he should deliver some words of substance. Something that would refocus and solidify the bond they all shared. But in that moment, such a natural, simple task proved utterly beyond him. What would be the point? They all knew these ceremonies had to continue. Nothing he could say would change that simple fact, and nothing he did would ever wash the stain of his brother's blood from his hands. It's clear Corian is struggling with his emotions here. What on earth could push a chapter to have to take the lives of one of their own, that would make a chapter master want to implement such a course of action? The story then cuts to battle. Captain Kafal and his squad are engaged with the enemy, rounds hammering in all around them as they charge the heretics before them. Crossing the open ground, the Space Marines are soon amongst the crazed humans, diving into their trenches, ripping the traitor heretics to pieces as they hack their way through. Individually, these mere humans pose no threat, but through sheer numbers, they attempt to overwhelm the Marines. Marine Kier leads the way through the trench, battling his way to the intersection. But the fanatical heretics aren't done. They have an Ogryn, With a thunderous smash, the Ogryn announces his arrival, crashing a steel bar straight into Keir, sending him and his weapon flying. Kafal turns his full attention to the threat, immediately pushing himself onwards to get to Keir in time. But it's not easy. For every fanatic he kills, more appear in their place, his chainsword becoming useless from the sheer amount of matter stuck between its teeth. Having to use it as a club instead, he pushes his way onwards, refusing to be stopped. At last, having freed himself from the mass of foes that sought to pull him down, Kafal quickly closes the distance to Keir. The beset warrior knocked backwards and was pinned against the side wall of the trench. The Berserker Ogryn raised its weapon, ready to bring the huge slab of ferrocrete down on the Space Marine's head. Fearing that he was too late, Kafal immediately reached for his bolt pistol. "Brother, get down." But before he could bring his weapon up, Keir reached out an arm towards his attacker, and a giant explosion of light seared from the Space Marine's hand. The foul mutant was immediately wreathed in a pillar of ethereal flame, screaming desperately as it tried to escape the burning agony. Rushing to Keir's side, Kafal hauled the Astartes back to his feet, the man's face a rictus of despair. "It is in me." Keir's voice sounded hollow as he spoke. "Captain, the taint has touched me." And there we get a sight of the malady that plagues the chapter. Quite literally, the psychic awakening. With the destruction of Cadia, the warp spilling out across the galaxy, we've been told how psychic powers are erupting across the Imperium, unchecked and unguarded. And here, we're getting a glimpse of how it's affecting a Space Marine chapter. Now, whether this particular chapter is perhaps of a more potent lineage, we don't know. You could assume perhaps, which would explain them suffering from what appears to be a high rate of these outbreaks. On the other hand, maybe not. Referring to it as a taint implies that they are hardly a librarian-heavy chapter, such as, say, the Blood Ravens. It'd be interesting to see how different chapters are reacting to this psychic awakening within their ranks differently. You'd hardly imagine the Blood Ravens, for example, to be referring to it as a taint. But what we do know is that it's quickly become a curse for this chapter. Back aboard the strike cruiser, Chapter Master Corian stares out amongst the stars, being joined by Captain Kafal. After a silence, Kafal informs the Chapter Master that Keir is being prepared for the purification ritual. Quite obviously a reference to what we saw at the start of this tale. Kafal informs his Chapter Master that the Inner Circle have been talking, and are agreed that he alone should not have to perform this act. They can see the toll it's taken on him. But the Chapter Master simply lets out a cold laughter. How many of our own people's lives have we been forced to cut short? How many of them have we led to some dark, forsaken corner of this ship, before bleeding them dry? And for what? Because they dared to manifest the psychic gifts that the Emperor himself imparted to us? Is that why we must end their existence? And expunge their glories from our chapter's history? Corian threw his arms wide with incredulity. Why must we hide what we are? You know how the High Lords will view such rampant manifestation of latent psychic abilities? Kafal answered him. And you know exactly what their response will be. The Chapter Master's eyes grew wide with intense fervour. And how does spilling the blood of our own help the Imperium? Where is the gain in that? Corian gestured out to the vista beyond the ship's exterior. Look at it. An entire galaxy filled with the weak and simpering, the corrupt and the decadent. And all the while we fight and die. Then we have to hide what we are from them? As if we are somehow the unclean and unworthy? He turned on his captain accusingly. Keir was one of yours. You cannot tell me that you think this is right. Kafal took a step towards his Chapter Master. his voice rising to match the level of the other Space Marine. "You know I do not. But think for a moment about what you are saying. If we allowed knowledge of this corruption to get out, it could damn us all. Every one of our brothers would be put to the sword if we are discovered. And you know that." Corian's anger was blunted at the pain evident in the other man's eyes, and he raised a hand in apology. Searching his old friend's face for a reaction, the chapter master asked him carefully, "But what if there was another way?" A couple of points here. Firstly, these purification rituals coming about from fear of the High Lords, that the chapter would be censured and erased for their rampant psychic manifestations. That's an interesting point, because absolutely I could see that happening before Guilliman's return. But what about now? Now he is back. If Guilliman knew of a chapter suffering such a situation, would he order such a thing? I can't see it. What if it was one of his successor chapters? What then? I mean, I really don't believe he would. And you have to assume this probably isn't one of his successors. Otherwise they would probably be talking of the Primarch more so than the High Lords. And then of course, the bitterness that it seeds. Small at first, deep within, but slowly growing. And before you know it, you're on the path straight to the ruinous powers. The inner circle assembled once more within a dark cargo room, this time with Kia standing proudly, fully armoured, at the centre of the group. As the chapter master enters, his mind turns to the men before him. The bonds of brotherhood they all share, forged and earned on countless battlefields across the Imperium. As they would risk their lives for him, so too would he for them. The disgust at what he's about to do recoils within him, and he activates the lightning claw. Kia doesn't even flinch as the weapon flares to life. Despite knowing what's about to happen, he stands tall and proud. And as Corian looks down to the Marine before him, he sees the faces of each and every Marine he's had to kill. The one before him embodies everything that's good about the chapter. He knows the loss will be keenly missed. And then, deep down inside, something breaks within the chapter master. With just a simple word: no. The chapter master shakes as he begins to speak. Not again. They bleed enough already. Now they have to kill their own? They all feel it, deep within them, awakening. It will claim them all eventually. And that's a great way of phrasing it, deep within them, awakening. Claiming them all eventually. Sure, he's referring to the psychic manifestations, but how equally that could be said to the feelings of heresy, to the seeds of chaos, already embedded deep within them in performing these acts. The gathered men begin to nod in agreement as their chapter master continues. Are we to lie down and die like dogs, for no other reason than the way we were made? He continued, his voice becoming increasingly fervent. We are warriors of the Adeptus Astartes. How much have we suffered and endured for the Emperor and his precious Imperium, only for us to stand here fearing sanction? And as what? Heretics? Witches? Murmurs of assent echoed around the room. The chapter master pointed to each man in turn. I bleed for you, my brothers, but not for this. He pointed to the aquila emblazoned across his chest. Not anymore. Between us, we have conquered entire subsectors, single-handedly destroying whole legions of Xenos. What do we truly have to fear? The faces of the Space Marines that surrounded him mirrored his own. We are warriors, not cattle. We are the predators, not the prey. It is time we acted as such. It was Kafal who stepped forward, earnestness written plainly across his face. What would you have us do, Lord? Corian grasped him with both hands, a cold smile forming as he answered. We take back our destiny, my brother. For you, me, and every one of our comrades that have died protecting this hollow, corrupt ideology of mankind. The chapter master turned to take in the rest of the room, speaking with surety. We fight for us now. Some will resist, brother, Cathal warned quietly. What do we do then? Corian's face took on an almost fanatical zeal. Then, we must enlighten them. Ah, how the mighty fall. How subtly the taint of the dark gods embeds itself within the souls of men. Even those as mighty as the Space Marines. Beginning so simply as fearing for their own survival, soon becoming a hatred for the ideology of mankind, and enlightening those that will not follow. What a great piece of writing this was. Seriously guys, if you haven't read it, go check it out. It's a 5-minute read at most, but man, it's good. How often do you get to see the corruption of a loyal chapter up close? Really good stuff. Now the question is which chapter is it? Whose lineage do you think it is? Do you get any vibes coming through of certain Primarchs? Honestly, my first thought was Unforgiven, for the secret of the ritual, but now I'm not so sure. I'd assume it's not an Ultima founding chapter, as they appear to begrudge how long they've been loyal servants. But of course I could be wrong. Drop your thoughts in the comments below guys, I'd love to know who you think it is. And as always, I love to read your thoughts and opinions. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support really means a lot to me, it truly does. And if you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.